Hi everyone, we left off in our last video with our style map showing neighborhoods of high makeup of seniors over 70, and now to answer our initial question, are there enough food banks delivering food in the city of Toronto? We need the information of the location of food bank. So I went ahead and found the location of food banks that are delivering on the 211toronto.ca website. I went through the entire list. I copied and pasted it on Excel, and technically if you know how to scrape a website, you can scrape the information as well. Now going into our spreadsheet, let's see how it looks. So here's my spreadsheet. I even went to the extent of changing the website link here to a URL because thinking ahead, I want my user to be able to click on the link in a map. So I would need the URL to be a string. I also added an ID column, and it's important to have this because it sets a reference in case you need to confirm a record and compare between your spreadsheet and the data on your map. So I simply label 1, 2, 3 for each record here, highlighted all of them, and dragged it down through my dataset. So let's bring this information onto my map. To do that, we need to make sure our file or our spreadsheet is a CSV. And going into my map viewer, I can add the CSV through the add content to map and then add layer from file. Or I can locate that CSV spreadsheet and simply drag that file over and drop it onto my map. Now when you do that, a new window will pop up to ask you how your table should be mapped, whether it's by coordinates, address, or simply as a table. So notice it's already recognized that it will be mapped by address because of the address column we have in our spreadsheet. And below here we have these two columns, one representing all the column names on the spreadsheet, and on the column on the right here we have these location fields, and these are options you can map with. So in this table here we are just identifying which column on our spreadsheet is a particular location. So for example, sort by community, this column here on my spreadsheet is my cities. And my address column on my spreadsheet is already instructed to map by address. So once I'm happy with all my settings here, I'm going to hit add layer. And as this is going on in the background, points are being added on the map using the ArcGIS geocoder. When something goes wrong during that process, a warning window will pop up, and here we are warned that there are two addresses not mapped. We can quickly do some investigative work, and I'm going to assign a task for you to find out the missing rows by indicating the ID number in the story map here. ID number, hint hint, and then you can watch this short video and learn how to add that data back into our dataset. For now, I'm going to hit OK. Now our points are brought into our map. I know it's not perfect because we have a random point at the border of Saskatchewan and Nunavut. So if we exit out from this change style panel, click on more options of this layer we just brought in, click on zoom to, and that would zoom you to the data that were on the spreadsheet. Now it should have zoomed a lot closer to the Greater Toronto area, so let's take a look at what the point up north here is doing on the map. So we can see from this point there are no information of address provided. So let's take a deeper look and see what Scarborough Food Security Initiative is actually located. So doing a quick Google search, find the first link, and we can see that there are information about Oak Ridge Food Bank, and this initiative by Scarborough Food Security services the location of Oak Ridge Scarborough. So let's edit our point so that it is within the Oak Ridge Scarborough neighborhood. So to do that, we can simply hit edit. I can modify the values of a particular record, but I can also click on a point and move it around. So I'm going to move it closer to Toronto because that's where the point is supposed to be. And this point or this food bank didn't have an actual location listed on their website. All they had was the community they are serving, which is Oak Ridge, Scarborough. So I am going to type in and find Oak Ridge, Scarborough. Oops. Click enter. So it's located me to where Oak Ridge, Scarborough is, and find that point where I dragged across Canada from up north, and click on that point and put it where it was. So, gotta play around with the positioning. And Oak Ridge, Scarborough. Let's save our map at the extent we want first. Hit save. Now, when we go to more option and zoom to our layer, we see that the map is zoomed to the Greater Toronto area. So let's go on ahead and save that layer we just created. And this is the same process as we did in the second video where we saved and we published. So I'm not going to bore you and repeat the process, but you can always go back to this picture in the story map that outlines the process of saving and publishing your data on ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to quickly do just that. This will be a good time to pause and publish your layer. And voila! I have my published food bank layer on here. Once that is done, let's take a look at our dataset and save our project. So let's zoom back into the extent and hit save. Notice that these points that we brought in, some of them extends outside of Toronto. So let's try to filter it out so that we are only looking at points that are within this Toronto boundary. There are several ways to do it. One way is to filter the data out. To filter the data out, we have to look at the data set itself. So let's look at the tabular format of our data. We can see there are a total of 209 features, and we have a column called sort by community. So we can filter out communities that are within Toronto, but at a quick glance, you can see that there are many different variables and just too many communities to keep track of. However, if we go into the address to look, you can see that for food banks that are located within Toronto, it does have that Toronto string inside this address column. That is one commonality we can filter the dataset by. We also need to remember that we have a point that did not have an address, so let's quickly add Toronto to that point. I remember it was in the Oak Ridge, Scarborough. We're going to hit search. It's going to zoom to that point, and we are going to edit this data. To edit a data of a published layer, we can simply go into the layers item page, go into the data tab, and find that corresponding food bank. Now, I always stress the importance of having an ID field because now I can go find the ID of this food bank, which is 153, in this tabular format of that data set. So let's do that. I'm going to find 153. So here is that corresponding food bank. Under address, I'm going to type in simply Toronto. And that's how you edit a published data. Now, while I was publishing my dataset, I noticed that some addresses also have the word Scarborough in it, and Scarborough is within Toronto. So that's something I might need to keep in mind when I am doing my filtering. So let's go back to our map and try to filter our dataset. Now, if we go back into our map, we can see our change being reflected by simply refreshing our page. Now, when we refresh our page, zoom into Oak Ridge, Scarborough, click on the point, and you'll see that the address has the Toronto text included in there. Now we can start filtering our data. To do that, we simply click on the funnel icon of the layer. This will lead us to a new window where you can specify the column you are filtering your data set, which in our case are addresses, and find a logic that matches what our criteria is. So we want to find the word Toronto contained in the column of addresses. So let's type in Toronto. And from editing our published data, we noticed that there was also Scarborough food banks, and these Scarborough food banks are within the city of Toronto. So we need to make sure to add that in. So let's add another expression and have it looking for Scarborough in the column of addresses. So after filling that out, we need to make sure that in this drop-down menu we have selected that to display features in the layer that matches any of the criteria we just indicated. So let's apply filter. We zoom to our extent, and now we can see that all our points are located within the city of Toronto. However, if you zoom to the actual layer, you'll notice that there are some points outside of the boundary. If I click on it, we'll see that the addresses contain the word Toronto, but it's actually for the street and not the city itself. So how do we fix the situation? Well, I can apply more condition in filter. Going into edit, I can add a new set of condition where address contains the word Toronto, as well as address that does not contain the city of Uxbridge. I'm going to ensure that the drop-down menu for the set condition that all of this expression has to be met. Now I can go back up and remove the Toronto condition because I already have that in here, and then apply filter. Notice now that the Uxbridge points are removed. Now we have all the variables we need to answer the question and do more analysis. Before we perform any analysis, we're going to learn how to configure a pop-up for a map. That would be in our next video. In the meantime, apply the knowledge you learned from the last video on styling to style the points on the map. In this video, we brought in food bank location from a 211 website to a spreadsheet, and from the spreadsheet, we converted the data to a point layer on a map. We also had a side task where we found missing data and added the missing data to make a complete data set. Next, we edited the data through map interface before the data was published. Then we published the data and also made edits after the data was published. Finally, we apply filter to our point data to isolate the data we want, finishing off our video of adding and modifying data on our map.